just the sound of your voice. And I'll always tell you if I'm recording, and you'll see it blinking down there. So, okay, so today we're going to continue solving equations. We're also going to solve problems that are word problems by writing equations and solving. But to start out, you can see the problems we're looking at are similar to what we did yesterday. These actually will look a little bit easier than the homework because they don't have the subscripts like r1, etc. It's going to be all x's, a's, b's, and numbers. The only difference in our directions today are going to say that they have to state restrictions. Find any restrictions on A and B. So that's going to be an additional piece today. So for example, does anyone remember what you would get if you take 5 divided by 0? Hence, you don't get a number answer, you get a word answer. Aiden? Close. Olivia?
Undefined.
Undefined. You guys also might remember your slope is said to be undefined when it goes straight up and down. Okay? It's impossible to have 5 of 0 things. If there were 0 things to start with, how could you ever possibly have 5 of them? What fraction is? If you type this in your calculator, you'll get a divide by 0 error. So what's going to happen today is that we might see an expression where our final answer looks like this. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to put a restriction on the variable so that we wouldn't get undefined, meaning that the function would not exist at that point. So you will just look at your denominator, because you're allowed to have 0 in the top. 0 divided by 5 is just 0. You're not allowed to have 0 in the bottom. So we're just going to be looking at our denominators, and we will say that the denominator cannot be, so we'll put equal with a slash through, 0. Because if we plug in 0, b divided by 0 will be undefined. A could be any other number. It could be 2, negative 2,072, positive a million. It can be any number, but it can't be 0. So those are called restrictions. So today we'll be using inverse operations to isolate our variable, just like yesterday. But then we will state any restrictions on the variables. And I do always want to mention, you don't just want to look at your final answer for denominators, you're going to look at the whole problem beginning to end. If there was ever a denominator, you have to restrict that value. And the restrictions are that the denominator cannot be 0. And again, I usually put this does not equal to symbol. Cannot equal 0. Alright, so all of these we're solving for x, which makes it a little bit easier. So we'll circle our x. What should I do first? And please be participating more of you, Morgan.
Subtract 8 on both sides.
Subtract 8 on both sides. Perfect. Some students will say multiply by a. That's not wrong. Just you're more likely to make a mistake. If you multiply by a, you'd have to distribute it and have 8a equals ab, and a lot of you will forget to do that. So subtracting would be your best option. And what is my last step? Solve for x. Kate. Multiply by a. So when we do it on that side, we just put an a. Over here, we will need parentheses because this is a binomial. So you can either leave it like that. That's an acceptable answer. Or you can distribute it. Either one, I don't care. But if you were to have x equals ab just minus 8, you would be wrong. Because it has to be 8a. You had to have distributed. All right, now our restrictions. It does say find any restrictions. Remember, restrictions are that your denominator can't be 0. So right now you would think there's no restrictions. I don't have a denominator. But you always have to look back at the original question and see if there was a denominator, and there was. So we have to restrict that variable. That variable a cannot be 0. A can be any number except 0. And that is our restriction. Okay, and example B. Solve for x. Uh-oh. We have 2 of them. So let's get those terms by themselves. Let's add our 15 over. get it down from being 2 terms to 1 term. Having 2 x's to just having 1 x. What do I need to do? We just did this in the homework question we went over with the R1 and R2s. McKaylee? Factor it out. So we pull it out front of a set of parentheses by division. Undistribute it, we're just left with inside the parentheses a plus b. So now we only have 1x showing up instead of 2. And then what is my last step to get x by itself? Sarah?
Divide by a plus b.
Good. Divide by the whole quantity a plus b. Do not redistribute. Now our restriction is going to be a little bit different for this one. So some students will just say a can't be 0 and b can't be 0. But there's actually more restrictions than that, Morgan.
A plus b cannot equal 0.
Perfect. You're going to take the whole denominator, a plus b, and say it cannot equal 0. Now, usually our book will take this a step further, and they'll actually have it as a cannot equal something. So we'll just use inverse operations. I see plus b, so I would subtract b from both sides to get a cannot equal negative b. I'm really okay with either of them, but I think when you look at my answer key, you're going to see these, so you might as well just get more comfortable with those. So basically the restrictions that the number can't be, a and b cannot be opposites. For example, 5 and negative 5. Add those together, you get 0. 7, negative 7, 0. 9 and negative 9, 0. So there's a lot of restrictions, not just it can't be one number. It can't be any numbers that are opposites of each other, if that makes sense.
So if on a test we put a plus b cannot equal 0, would you still count that as acceptable?
Yes. But you need to be comfortable with both in case you see a multiple choice question, and that's the only thing that's there. Okay. All right, try example C on your own, and then we'll do D together. What would I do next, Caleb? Multiply by b. Good. Group the other side since we have a binomial. And then it's up to you whether you want to leave it like it is now or distribute. Do you want me to distribute or do you want to leave it? Just leave it. Okay. And then I think our last step I'm not even going to ask you would be to minus a. Now when you minus the a over here, you would have to put it after. You cannot cross off those a's because one's inside. And you're welcome to leave it like this if you want. Or if you want to distribute it, you would have ab minus b squared minus a. Either way, you don't have any like terms because you don't have any, like this has an a and this has an a, but you would need them both to have ab. You can't combine any like terms. Restrictions. We have none on the final answer. Do we have any on the original, Olivia?
B can't be 0.
B cannot be 0. B could be any number, just can't be 0. All right, the rest of them are going to be some word problems with geometry and also just number theory. So anytime you have a geometry problem, it's useful to probably draw a picture. So we have Adrian. He's planning to use part of his garage wall as one of the long sides of a rectangular rabbit pen. So I just sketched a little rectangle over here. So his garage wall will be one of the long sides. So I'm just going to label this. This is his wall, and then he's putting 3 sides around it to push it against the wall to enclose his rabbits. He wants the pen to be 3 times as long as it is wide, and he plans to use 60 feet of fencing. So again, he only has to fence these 3 sides because you're pushing it up against the wall. So we need to use an expression to represent 3 times as long as it is wide. What do we think? What expression or variable expressions could we use to represent that? 3 times as long as it is wide. Morgan?
How wide is going to be x?
Yep.
3 times will be 3x.
Perfect. You also can use W's if you prefer. So you could have this as W This is W and this is 3W. Doesn't matter what variable you use. I wouldn't use L because we're talking about the width, but you could and then figure it out later. And we are using 60 feet of fencing to enclose these three, so we'll just add up our like terms. X plus 3x plus x equals 60. Combine your like terms and solve. Make sure you find the dimensions. They want to know the length and the width, not just the width. Dimensions are usually in this form, length by width, and they use like an X to represent the word by. What did we get for the width, which will be our X? First of all, Dax, 12. And it would be 12 feet. Oh, side note, units. You guys will hate me all year, but I'm preparing you for your AP test. It takes all points for units. You'll lose a half point every time you create a unit, a word problem. Even if it's a dollar sign. Centimeters, inches, degrees Fahrenheit, degrees Celsius, feet. A lot of you will miss the STAR student board, which is still being constructed back there, but STAR student board is 100%. And if you miss the 100% by half point, you'll just be kicking yourself. So before you turn in your test, go look at all your word problems, make sure you put your units. So 12 feet. What is our length going to be? Olivia?
36 feet.
36 feet. Just plugging that back in. So 36 feet by 12 feet. Perfect. Try the next one on your own. It will be a little bit more involved. This one will have a rectangle. It says the length is 3 more than twice the width. And you are enclosing the whole shape this time, so all 4 sides. Given that the perimeter is 48, find the dimensions of the rectangle. All right, last few examples. Oh, no, we have one more geometry. Sides of a quadrilateral. So I just drew a quadrilateral on there. We don't know what it looks like, so I just made it irregularly shaped. It says the sides of the quadrilateral are in a ratio of 2 to 3 to 4 to 6. So a ratio, whenever you have like just 2 things, is like a reduced fraction. So like if something was in the ratio of 2 to 4, you could reduce it to 1 to 2. Okay, so when all 4 sides are reduced by a common factor, they get down to 2 to 3 to 4 to 6. So for example, maybe if you multiply all of these by 2, you would get 4, 6, 8, 12. Maybe those are the sides. Because if we reduce these by a factor of 2, we get back to 2, 3, 4, 6. Or maybe they're multiplying each of these numbers by 3. So we would get 6, 9, 12, 18. So we don't know what number they're multiplying by to get the side lengths that are going to add up to 150. But whenever you take the side lengths, the 4 of them, and reduce them by a common factor, you'll get back to 2, 3, 4, 6. So anytime you see this ratio, the easiest thing to do is to insert a variable, which I'll usually use x, with each of those ratios. So if it's 2 to 3 to 4 to 6, it's 2x to 3x to 4x to 6x, because they're all going to get multiplied by a constant value. So throw those on our picture. We have 2x, 3x, 4x, 6x. Doesn't matter where you put them, I just put them logically what looks the shortest and longest. The perimeter has to be 150, so we need to add up all of our sides and set it equal to 150. For irregular quadrilateral, there's no formula for perimeter, just add them all up. So we get 5 and 10, which is 15. So x is 10. I can't tell you how many of you will circle that and move on to your next problem because you're a rusher. You're somebody who rushes through. Read the problem when you're done before you answer the question. It says, find the lengths of the sides. So you need to take the 10, and you got to plug it back in. So the sides are 20 centimeters, 30 centimeters, 40 centimeters, and 60 centimeters. Units. All right, the last couple examples are about number theory. They talk about consecutive numbers. Consecutive integers are integers that go in order. So 7, 8, 9, 13, 14, 15. So let's put down 4, 5, 6, 7. Those are consecutive integers. They go in order. They are also known as integers that differ by 1. So they're 1 unit apart from one another. Remember, integers don't include decimals, so these are going to be positive and negative whole numbers. Now, consecutive even integers like 2, 4, 6, those would be integers that differ by how many? 2. 2 plus 2 is 4, 4 plus 2 is 6, 6 plus 2 is 8. So the starting number is even, and you add 2 to find the other terms. Odd integers, like 3, 5, 7, those are also integers. How much do they differ by? 2 also. So the only difference between an odd and an even number is the starting term. So if it starts out even, add 2, you get another even. If it starts out odd, add 2, you get another odd. So they're going to give us some like riddle problems. We have to figure out what the numbers are that satisfy this expression. If you had a calculator, a lot of you would just guess and check it until you figured out the answer, or you would divide to get close enough to guess and check. You're not going to have a calculator. So this one says the sum of 3 consecutive integers. So consecutive integers go in order. So we have 3 numbers equaling 147. Morgan?
X plus 1 plus x plus 4.
Perfect. We need to define variables to represent the first integer, the second, and the third. Now, if there were a fourth, you would also come up with the fourth. The first one, we always want to be just a plain variable x. Since these are consecutive, Morgan's correct, we're going to add 1 to the next term, because consecutive integers differ by 1. And then the third one, you add 1 to the previous, which would be x plus 1 plus 1, which is x plus 2. So we fill those in our gaps in our little sum problem over here. And then we all should know how to solve from there. Combine our like terms and solve. Since we're a little short on time, I'll just tell you the answer. We should get 48. Again, 48 is not your answer, that's your starting number. So you then need to plug it back in. So your answers are 48, 49, and 50. Okay, don't just stop at the answer and reread your question. And our last one, example 5, are the sum of 3 consecutive odd integers is 141. But because it's odd, that's going to change the way we define our variables. The first one will still be x. What will the second one be? Think about how much they differ by 8. Good, they differ by 2. And then the third one will be 2 larger than the last one, so x plus 4. While I'm passing out your homework, see if you guys can solve that equation to get what the 3 odd integers are. Alright, our answers here we should be getting are 45, 47, and 49. On the homework, make sure you skip 36, 38, 42, 44, and 46, as those are repeats. Do not skip number 40. So do number 40.